I thought marrying into Daniel's wealthy family meant I had finally found belonging. That night, under the chandeliers of a luxury restaurant, my smile felt genuine until my sister-in-law slid into my seat without hesitation. Her smirk cut deeper than words, while the family laughed as if I were invisible. I stayed silent, my heart pounding, humiliation burning my skin. But silence was my weapon, because as they mocked me over the table settings and wine, none of them knew the truth. Every marble tile beneath their feet, every crystal glass in their hands, belonged to me. I used to believe that love could erase every difference, that the vows Daniel and I exchanged meant his family would welcome me as their own. He came from a lineage of polished names and old money, while I came from the ordinary, a background easily overlooked in their circles. Tonight was supposed to be the night those lines blurred, the night I would finally feel like I belonged. The family had chosen one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, a place where chandeliers dripped with light and the marble floors reflected every step like polished glass. I spent hours preparing, not just my dress or my hair, but my composure. This dinner was not merely a meal, it was an initiation. Walking into the private dining hall beside Daniel, I carried hope in my chest, a fragile hope that tonight would silence every whisper that I wasn't enough. His relatives were already seated, their laughter filling the room. For a moment, as I smiled and greeted them, I let myself believe in the illusion. The head table was long, dressed in crisp white linen, silverware aligned with surgical precision. My seat was marked beside Daniel's, a small name card resting against the wine glass. But before I could settle, Claire, Daniel's elder sister, swept across the room in her designer heels. With a calculated grace, she slipped into my chair, lifted my name card, and tossed it aside as though it were litter. Her smirk sliced through the air. "Oh, sit anywhere, Emily," she said, voice syrupy sweet but dripping with disdain. "A chair's a chair, isn't it? Especially when you already know the staff here so well." The room erupted in laughter, the kind of laughter that excluded me, that built walls around everyone else and left me outside. My face burned, though I kept my expression calm. Daniel's silence beside me was deafening. He looked down at his glass, unwilling to meet my eyes. I stood for a second too long, clutching the clutch bag in my hand like a lifeline, and finally lowered myself into a spare seat further down the table. To them, it looked like defeat. To me, it was a choice. My heart raced, but I swallowed every word that wanted to claw its way out of me, because words were cheap here. Silence could be priceless. Claire raised her glass in a mock toast. "To family," she declared, eyes glinting as though the word itself excluded me. The clinking of crystal against crystal echoed like a verdict. I forced a smile, the kind that cost me more strength than any confrontation. My fingers tightened around the stem of my wine glass until it threatened to snap. I looked at each face, smirking cousins, Daniel's watchful mother, Claire basking in her petty triumph, and let the humiliation soak into me like poison. But inside, something shifted. As their laughter rolled on, my eyes drifted toward the maitre d', who had been discreetly observing from the edge of the room. Our gazes locked for a fraction of a second, and he inclined his head ever so slightly, almost imperceptible to anyone else, a silent acknowledgement, a reminder of what they did not know. Claire leaned closer to Daniel, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She looks so out of place, doesn't she? Like a guest who wandered into the wrong party." More laughter, sharper this time, puncturing my skin like needles. I sipped my wine, the bitter taste grounding me, and remained silent. That silence, I knew, unnerved them more than any protest could. It left them wondering whether I was too weak to fight back or too strong to bother. Dinner continued with plates of foie gras and truffle risotto, conversations about investments and vacations, each word laced with the subtle exclusion of my presence. Every so often, Claire's eyes flicked toward me, searching for cracks in my facade. She wanted me to break, to lash out, to confirm every prejudice she held about me, but I didn't. Instead, I listened to their arrogance, their shallow pride, their certainty that I was beneath them. And with every passing minute, my resolve hardened. They thought they had stolen my seat at the table. They thought they had pushed me to the margins. What they didn't realize was that the table itself stood on foundations I had quietly laid. As the main course arrived, the maitre d' approached the head of the table. His presence drew silence, his voice calm but weighted. He turned to me, and with the kind of deference no one in the room had shown me all night, bowed his head. "Madam," he said clearly, his words slicing through the hush, "everything has been prepared exactly to your specifications. Would you like us to proceed as planned?" The room froze. Forks hovered in midair, eyes widened, and for the first time all evening every gaze turned to me, not with dismissal, but with dawning confusion. And in that moment, the illusion shattered. For a moment, no one at the table breathed. The maitre d's words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. My face remained calm, almost timid, as though I didn't quite understand what he meant. That performance was deliberate. I let my shoulders slump, my eyes dart nervously, feigning the role they expected me to play, the powerless outsider. Claire burst into laughter first, breaking the tension. "Oh, please," she scoffed, swirling her wine. He must be confusing her with someone else. Emily couldn't possibly have anything to do with this place. Her tone was sharp enough to cut glass, and the cousins followed with obedient chuckles. I lowered my gaze, folding my napkin slowly, the picture of a woman embarrassed into silence. Inside, however, my mind raced with calculations. If Claire wanted a spectacle, she would get one, just not in the way she imagined. Pulling out her phone, she propped it against her glass and started a live stream. The faint glow illuminated her smug smile as she angled the camera toward me. "Look, everyone," she said, her voice dripping with false affection. "This is my new sister-in-law. Pretty, isn't she? But don't be fooled. She's just an ordinary girl who lucked into our family. See how shy she is? Doesn't she look lost?" Laughter rippled through the table again. The stream's comments poured in, emojis and text flying across her screen. Gold digger vibes. She doesn't belong at that table. Luxury background. Basic face. The cruelty was casual, almost gleeful. My stomach tightened, but I didn't let it show. Daniel's silence was the loudest sound of all. He sat still, eyes fixed on his plate, unwilling to defend me. That silence cut deeper than any insult. I tilted my head slightly, just enough for the camera to catch my forced smile. A smile that looked timid to Claire's audience, but carried a message only I understood. I am not what you think I am. As the live stream rolled on, the comments shifted. Amid the sea of mockery, a few curious voices emerged. Wait, why did the maitre d' call her Madame? I've been to that restaurant. I heard a woman owns it, not a man. Isn't this the chain that just expanded? The name Emily was in the news. Claire didn't notice. She was too busy basking in her own cruelty, tilting the camera to show me sitting quietly at the end of the table, as though I were invisible. See? She doesn't even fight back, she said with mock pity. Bless her heart. I let the humiliation simmer, because humiliation could be turned into fuel. A waiter approached, holding a black leather-bound menu. He leaned toward me with a respectful bow. "Madam, this is prepared as per your instructions." He placed the menu directly in front of me, its gold lettering catching the chandelier's light. My name, embossed in fine print, gleamed on the cover. Emily Carter Private Selection. For a heartbeat. No one moved. Forks hovered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Claire froze. Phone still recording, her smirk faltering. What is this?" she demanded, her voice shrill now. She grabbed the menu, flipping it open. Inside, the dishes bore annotations. Curated by Emily Carter. The wine list carried my signature. The live stream comments exploded. "Holy shit, it's her restaurant." "No way, she's the owner." "This is legendary. They've been mocking the boss at her own place." I sat back, lips curling into the faintest smile. Not wide, not boastful, just enough to unsettle them. My silence was no longer submission. It was control. Claire slammed the menu shut, cheeks flushed. "This is a joke, a PR stunt," she spat. Her laughter was brittle, desperate. Daniel finally looked at me then, his brow furrowed with something that looked almost like fear. His lips parted, but no words came. I lifted my glass again, swirling the wine slowly, savoring the silence that had fallen over the room. "Sometimes," I said softly, my voice measured and calm, "people assume the quiet ones have nothing to say. They forget that silence often means the story isn't finished yet." Claire's phone buzzed violently on the table. Notifications flooded in. A well-known business journalist had tweeted, "Breaking, sources confirm the true owner of La Vienne restaurant has been spotted tonight. Not a CEO, not a man, but Emily Carter herself." The tweet spread like wildfire. Every phone in the room buzzed with alerts. My in-laws stared at their screens in disbelief, their earlier laughter curdling into shock. I lifted my gaze, meeting Claire's trembling eyes. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to gloat. My presence alone was enough, and just like that, the balance of power shifted. The room was still reeling from the revelation, but my mind had already slipped into another place. 5 years earlier, before any of this grandeur, before Daniel's family had ever looked down on me. Back then, I was just Emily Carter, a woman with quiet ambitions and a taste for risk. I had saved every dollar from my first job, reinvested small wins into bigger ventures, until I stumbled into hospitality. What began as a modest cafe grew into something larger, piece by piece. But I never attached my name, never gave the world a face to associate with the empire. I built my restaurants under the cloak of a private holding company. Those years of silence, of biting my tongue when Claire mocked my thrift store dress, or when my mother-in-law commented on my lack of pedigree, were not weakness. They were practice, observing, calculating. Every humiliation they offered me was a reminder of why I needed independence, why I couldn't afford to be at their mercy. I remembered the day Daniel's father laughed when I asked about joining one of their investment discussions. "It's not your world, Emily," he had said kindly but firmly. Claire had been less subtle. "Leave business to those who actually understand it." They thought shutting me out would keep me small. What they didn't realize was that their dismissal gave me the fire to build something far greater than they ever imagined. Now, seated across from Claire, I let those memories steal me. My lips curved in a faint smile as I lifted my glass, the reflection of the chandelier dancing in the crimson wine. "Shall we see," I murmured, locking eyes with her, "who truly belongs at this table?" Her face blanched, then hardened. For the first time that evening, she faltered. But Claire was not a woman who surrendered easily. Within hours of leaving that dinner, she struck back. The next morning, social media buzzed with a new narrative. Posts emerged claiming I was nothing more than a figurehead, that Daniel was the one truly holding the deeds and accounts. Screenshots of supposed documents circulated, contracts with my name tucked neatly under his, as though my signature had no authority without his. "Paper owner," one caption sneered. "Pretty wife with borrowed power." The public, fickle as ever, split into factions. Some defended me fiercely, pointing to the menu, the staff's respect, the journalist's leak. Others sided with Claire's version, convinced that I was a fraud propped up by my husband's wealth. I scrolled through the comments in the dark silence of my bedroom, Daniel asleep beside me, his breathing even. The screen's glow burned into my eyes. She fooled us. Classic gold digger move. Cancel her. The word cancel appeared again and again, sharp as a knife. I had lived long enough to know how quickly adoration could curdle into contempt. But this was no longer just about me, it was about power, about refusing to let them write my story while I was still alive to tell it. When I appeared at the restaurant the next day, cameras were waiting. "Emily, is it true your husband owns everything in your name? Emily, are you the real investor or just a front?" Their voices fired like bullets, each question designed to wound. I walked past without answering, though my chest tightened with every shutter click. Inside, my staff greeted me with the same deference as always. Yet even in their eyes, I caught flickers of doubt, the virus of suspicion spreading. That night, the blow landed harder. A video surfaced online. Grainy at first, but sharpened by algorithms, it showed a woman, me, or at least a version of me, leaning across a bar to kiss a man who wasn't Daniel. The caption screamed, "Before the marriage, proof she was never faithful." I felt the blood drain from my face as I watched. It was me, down to the way my hair curled behind my ear, the shape of my smile. But it wasn't me. The video was a fabrication, a deep fake so meticulously crafted that even I found myself questioning the angles. Within minutes, it went viral. Headlines screamed betrayal. Hashtags bloomed overnight. So became Emily exposed. Okejokron gold digger truth. Strangers dissected my supposed infidelity, my motives, my very character, as though they had been in the room with me. Daniel's phone buzzed endlessly on the nightstand. He didn't look at me when he picked it up, his jaw clenched, eyes dark. "Emily," he said finally, his voice low. "What is this?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. How do you defend yourself against a lie that looks more real than truth? In that moment, staring at the man I had once believed would protect me, I realized I was not fighting just a family anymore. I was fighting an entire system, one that thrived on scandal, one that hungered for blood, and one that had decided mine was the sweetest. And I knew, as the world turned against me, that this was only the beginning. The morning of the press conference, I stood before the gilded mirrors of my restaurant's private hall, staring at the reflection of a woman I barely recognized. My hair was pinned neatly, my suit tailored to perfection, but my eyes carried the exhaustion of sleepless nights and the fire of someone who had been pushed too far. Outside, the hum of reporters swelled, cameras waiting to capture either my collapse or my rebirth. When I stepped onto the stage, the room erupted with flashes. I walked to the podium, each step deliberate, steady, as though my heels struck not marble, but the very heartbeat of my enemies. My staff lined the walls, their presence silent but loyal. "Good afternoon," I began, voice level, though my chest thrummed with adrenaline. "There have been questions about my role in this establishment and accusations about my integrity. I am here to end those questions." The screens behind me lit up with documents, deeds, contracts, shareholder agreements, all bearing my signature. The company seal glowed at the corner of every page. "This restaurant," I said, my voice gaining strength, "and the chain it belongs to have been owned and operated by me for the past 5 years. Every expansion, every menu, every decision, mine. Not Daniel's, not the Carter family's, mine." A murmur surged through the crowd. Cameras zoomed closer, journalists scribbling furiously. I gestured toward the maitre d' standing nearby. "You may verify these records with the city registrar. Everything is public. Everything is legal." The live stream counter ticked upward. Tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Hashtags began trending in real time. "Didn't Emily owns it? Eastern power reclaimed." For weeks, I had been the subject of mockery, the silent wife humiliated at her own table. Now I was something else. My phone buzzed with notifications, women cheering me on, calling me an inspiration, a proof that silence does not equal weakness. I looked directly into the cameras. For too long, women who marry into wealth are dismissed as ornaments or opportunists. I am neither. I built this empire myself, while being told I wasn't good enough to sit at their table. Well, today, I sit at the head. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous. For a moment, I let it wash over me, the validation, the vindication. But as I turned my gaze toward the front row, I saw Daniel. He sat among his family, his jaw tight, his hands clasped, his expression unreadable. He hadn't clapped. He hadn't moved. He simply stared at me, his eyes dark pools concealing thoughts I couldn't yet decipher. My triumph felt sharper, almost fragile, against the weight of his silence. Still, the show had only begun. "Before I conclude," I said, flipping another page onto the projector, "there is one more truth that must be revealed." The screen filled with spreadsheets, bank records, and emails. "Claire Carter," I announced, letting the name hang heavy, "has been diverting funds from the family's charitable foundation into private accounts." Gasps rippled through the hall. Claire leapt to her feet, her face drained of color. "Lies!" she shrieked, but the evidence glowed behind me. Undeniable. Transaction histories, signatures, dates, all pointing directly to her. While presenting herself as the paragon of family honor, I continued, my tone icy, Claire has stolen from the very causes she claimed to champion. Hospitals, shelters, education programs, all deprived for the sake of her handbags and vacations. The journalists exploded with questions, voices overlapping in a frenzy, microphones thrust forward. Claire's protests dissolved beneath the roar of scandal. On the live stream, comments flooded. So the bully was the thief all along. She humiliated Emily while stealing from orphans. Justice served. I looked at my in-laws, watching cracks form in their carefully constructed facade. Daniel's mother stared at the floor, her lips pressed tight. His cousins whispered among themselves, some with disgust, others with fear. The unity they once flaunted was unraveling before my eyes. But still, Daniel did not move, not when Claire fled the room in tears, not when reporters swarmed his mother. He remained still, a statue carved in stone. At last he rose, drawing the attention of every camera. The room hushed as he stepped forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "I knew," he said quietly, but his voice carried, amplified by the silence. "I knew about the restaurants. I knew about Claire. I knew everything." My heart clenched. "And you said nothing?" I whispered, though the microphone caught my words for the entire world to hear. Daniel's gaze hardened. I chose silence, because sometimes silence keeps a family intact. The hall erupted, not in applause this time, but in chaos. Reporters shouted, the live stream comment feed exploded with outrage. And in that storm, I stood frozen, my victory colliding with betrayal once again. The fallout from the press conference was swift and merciless. Newspapers plastered my face across their front pages, calling me everything from a trailblazer to a destroyer. Headlines screamed about Claire's scandal, about my empire, about Daniel's revelation. And while strangers online hailed me as a symbol of independence, within the walls of my own home, the silence grew louder. Daniel barely spoke to me. He went through the motions. Coming home late, eating in silence, retreating to his study with the door locked. When he did look at me, there was no admiration, no warmth, only distance. One evening, as I poured 2 glasses of wine, I caught his reflection in the kitchen window. "You've changed," he said, voice flat. "I haven't changed," I replied softly. "I've simply stopped hiding who I am." He shook his head, his eyes shadowed. "You humiliated my sister in front of the world. You tore apart this family. Do you even realize what you've done?" I revealed the truth, I said, setting the glass down. "She humiliated me for years, Daniel. She stole from charities. Are you really angry at me or at the fact that I refuse to stay silent?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past me, leaving the wine untouched. That night, I lay awake in the wide, cold bed, wondering when the man I had once trusted became a stranger. The world outside seemed to echo his sentiment. While many applauded me, others painted me as ruthless. A business magazine ran a profile titled "The Ice Queen of Hospitality." Commentators debated on television whether women in power inevitably sacrifice their softness. I told myself I didn't care, but in the quiet hours their words gnawed at me. Had I become the very thing they accused me of? Unyielding, heartless. My staff saw strength in me. The public saw power. But Daniel saw only cruelty. And I was caught between the person I had fought to become and the woman I had once promised to be. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday. Daniel stood at the doorway with a suitcase, his shoulders slumped, his tie loose, but his eyes hard. "I don't know who you are anymore," he said, voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "You're not the woman I married." The suitcase wheels clattered against the marble floor as he walked away. The echo followed me long after the door shut behind him. For the first time in years, I cried, not out of humiliation, but from the fear that winning had cost me the one thing I had once valued above all. Days later, still raw from Daniel's departure, I received an unexpected invitation. My mother-in-law wanted to meet. The message was simple, almost curt. We should speak privately, tomorrow. Curiosity and dread coiled in my stomach as I arrived at her sprawling estate. She greeted me not with warmth, but with a gaze as sharp as steel. "You think Claire was the enemy," she began, her voice measured. "But Claire was just a pawn." I froze, her words settling like stones. "I allowed her to test you," she continued. "I wanted to see if you had the strength to endure this family. Daniel, he was never as strong as his father. I needed to know if you could be the one to carry the Carter legacy forward." My mouth went dry. "You mean all of this? Claire's cruelty, your silence? It was a test?" She nodded once. "And you passed. But now you must choose the Carter family or your ambition. You cannot have both." Her eyes bored into me, unblinking. "If you want to remain in this marriage, to stay in this family, you will give up your empire. A wife of Carter blood does not compete with her husband." Rage flared in me, but beneath it, a deeper conflict churned. Could I abandon everything I had built? The nights of labor, the risks, the empire that bore my name, for the sake of a love already crumbling? Could I live as their obedient daughter-in-law, silenced and diminished once more? I thought of the women who had messaged me after the press conference, telling me I had given them courage. I thought of the young girls who saw me as proof that they could rise above the voices telling them to stay small. Could I betray them and myself just to keep Daniel? The answer rose from somewhere deep, unshakable. I leaned forward, my voice steady, almost a whisper. "I choose not to live by your rules." Her expression did not change, but I saw the flicker of something. Anger, perhaps, or respect. In that instant, I knew the war was far from over, but for the first time, I also knew exactly where I stood. The storm had raged long enough. For months after Daniel's departure and my confrontation with his mother, I lived as though standing on the edge of a cliff, the world daring me to fall. But I did not fall. Instead, I leapt forward, away from the family name that had shackled me into the uncharted air of my own making. I dissolved every joint account tied to the Carters, severed any financial cord that tethered me to them. With the profits from my restaurants, I built a new corporation under my own name, Emily Carter Global Hospitality. The title itself was a declaration. I was no longer hiding behind shadows or anonymous holdings. This was me, visible and unapologetic. In the months that followed, I expanded internationally. Paris, Tokyo, Dubai. The doors of my establishments opened in cities that had once been mere pins on a dream board. Critics praised the elegance, the innovation, the authenticity of a brand that carried my personal imprint. Each review, each headline carved away the last remnants of doubt. I discovered that I no longer cared for the Carters' recognition. Their approval had once been the prize I chased, like a starving woman chasing crumbs. But now, I had my own banquet. Every contract signed, every restaurant launched, every woman who wrote to tell me she found courage in my story, these became my validation. Then one evening, as I reviewed plans for my next expansion, a familiar knock sounded at my door. Daniel stood there, rain-soaked, shoulders heavy with something that was not pride, but regret. His eyes, once distant, now searched mine as though seeking absolution. I was weak, he admitted, his voice rough. I let silence be my shield because I was afraid of losing them. And in the process, I lost you. I didn't defend you when you needed me. I didn't stand beside you. I'm sorry. For a moment, the memory of the man I had married flickered in my chest. The laughter we once shared, the promises whispered in the dark. But I was no longer that woman, waiting for rescue. I had become my own salvation. I studied him quietly, the weight of his apology pressing against years of pain. And then I smiled, a soft, steady smile. You can stay, I said, my voice calm, but you will never again be the reason I exist. His eyes glistened, and for the first time he seemed to understand. He nodded, accepting the truth that our love, if it survived at all, would no longer be a cage, but a choice. That night, as the city lights flickered beyond my window, I realized I had broken the game. I had stepped outside the cycle of humiliation and validation, no longer defined by their rules. The world noticed. Invitations poured in, not just to dine, but to speak. Conferences, panels, universities. They wanted to hear not just about my empire, but about the woman behind it. And so I stood on stages before thousands, telling my story of betrayal and reclamation, of silence turned into strength. I was once told I didn't belong at the table, I would say, my voice steady into the microphone. So I built my own, and then I built more, until no one could deny me a place. The applause was never just for me. It was for every woman who saw herself in my journey. Even the Carters, once so haughty and untouchable, had no choice but to acknowledge me. They attended one of my grand openings, their smiles brittle, their words stiff. I accepted their handshakes without warmth, not because I craved their approval, but because I no longer needed it. Their power over me had dissolved. I had become more than a daughter-in-law, more than a wife. I was a name, a force, a legacy. But true transcendence came not in boardrooms or auditoriums, but in the quiet moments, walking alone through one of my restaurants and seeing young women working the floors, leading the kitchens, managing the books. Women who once doubted themselves now carried authority because they saw in me what was possible. That was the legacy I wanted. Not wealth, not fame, but the spark of belief passed from one woman to another. The final test came in a boardroom high above the city, the skyline stretching like a crown of glass beyond the windows. The meeting had been long, decisions made, contracts signed. As the last of the executives filed out, I lingered behind. Alone, I gathered my notes, the room empty but for the echo of my footsteps. I walked to the massive doors, each step measured, certain. When I pushed them open, a flood of light poured in, golden and blinding, as though the world itself was welcoming me into a new order, and for the first time I felt entirely free.